he'll be a few minutes late. He's on his way.
Thank you very much. More read sort of this order.
Good morning, Dave. Good. How do you see me? Good. Good time.
Council, shall we call this meeting to order? I've just heard from Mr. Jarvis. I believe he's on the Honey Harbor Road, so we expect him here shortly, but I think we can get the meeting started without him. So I will call this meeting to order at 9:04 a.m. I could add Tuesday, October 15th for your benefit. I'd like to open this meeting by acknowledging that we are on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, specifically Ojibwe, Chippewa, and Algonquian peoples. This territory is covered by the Robinson-Huron Treaty of 1850 and the Williams Treaty of 1923. As settlers, we are grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. Long before today, as we gather here, there have been indigenous peoples who have been the stewards of these lands and waters. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to this place. We also recognize the contributions First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and other indigenous peoples have made, both in shaping and strengthening this community in particular, and in our province and country as a whole. This recognition of the contributions and historic importance of indigenous people must also be clearly and overtly connected to our collective commitment to make the promise and challenge of truth and reconciliation real in our communities. I would also like to acknowledge the Wata Mohawks, Moose Deer. Next item on the agenda is a staff award. So, I thought we'd... Are we missing our photographer?
Okay, hold on. Jessica's got one, Kaylee. No, we're not missing.
Okay, good. I must ask Council at this point if they have any declarations of pecuniary interest for what is coming forth on the Planning Council agenda. And I'm seeing heads shaking, so I'm going to take that as a no. And you have a motion for me to read, I'm sure. Be it resolved that Council adopts the agenda of the October 15th, 2019 Planning Council as circulated. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. This morning there's one public meeting scheduled for Shore Road closing applications. I'll briefly summarize the procedure to be utilized for the meeting. First, the clerk will advise council as to when, how, and to whom notice of the public meeting was circulated, and staff will summarize any correspondence on file. Next, staff will advise of the purpose and the effect of the bylaw and provide for any other information that is relevant to the applications. From there, the applicant and member of the public will have an opportunity to speak to the bylaw being considered. Council will then consider the bylaw immediately following. I now declare this meeting to be a public meeting pursuant to Municipal Act sections of 2001, Section 25, as amended to deal with the following proposed road closing bylaws. 2019-05 Conrad, and 2019-06 Conrad. To the clerk.
Notice of the public meeting was published in a newspaper, and notice was sent to the abutting neighbors in the close proximity of the property at least 20 days prior to today's meeting.
Thank you, and to the staff.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I will be presenting a shore road allowance purchase for 113 and 123 Madison Avenue, Honey Harbor. The closure is requested as the applicant wishes to own the parcels of land. As this is 123 and this is 113. This is the aerial view, 123 and 113. Part 4 is 475 square meters for a purchase price of $3,800. Part 5 is 485 square meters for a purchase price of $3,888. The total area to be sold is 960 square meters for a purchase price of $7,680 plus HST. Staff have no concerns with this purchase.
Thank you very much. Have we received any correspondence in regards to this?
No.
And I see only one member of the public, and I don't believe you're here to comment on this. I believe that gives me permission to close the public portion of the meeting. So over to council. Any comments on this shore road allowance application? Councilor Jarvis.
Yeah, I'm curious. I know that later on in this meeting, we're going to be discussing a swap that includes shore road allowance as well. I'm just curious to know why this wasn't included as part of the swap as opposed to, I mean, purchase is great, it's money in our pocket, but what's the difference between the swap that's being proposed and, other than obviously it's different parcels of land, but it's the same concept. So I'm just curious why we were having them pay for part of it and we're swapping the rest of it.
As the swap that you're dealing with after has been taking place since 2014. It's been a very lengthy process. This is completely separate application, so we're just not including it in the swap.
Okay.
I see no other hands raised, so I will read the motion. Be it resolved, the council passed bylaw 2019-105, being a bylaw to stop up and close the shore road allowance in front of lot 38, concession 11, in the Township of Georgian Bay. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Do we want other? This one. Okay. So now sorry? Yes, we have to do another speech, don't we? Oh, there it is. Thank you. Too much paperwork. We next have a public meeting held under authority of the Planning Act. This morning, there's a public meeting scheduled for 2 proposed zoning bylaw amendments. I will briefly summarize the procedure to be utilized for the meeting. First, the acting clerk will advise council as to when, how, and to whom notice of the public meeting was circulated for the proposed amendments being considered. The acting clerk will also advise of the appeal procedure. Next, staff will advise of the purpose and effect of the bylaws and provide any other information that is relevant to the applications, and the acting clerk will summarize any correspondence on file. From there, the public will have an opportunity to speak to the amendments being considered through the mayor. After the public discussion, the public meeting will be closed, and I lost my spot. Council will then consider the bylaws immediately following. I now declare this meeting to be a public meeting pursuant to Section 34 of the Planning Act to deal with the following proposed amendments. Z19/14, Herald, and Z19/15, Herald. To the acting clerk.
Notice of the public meeting was sent by first-class mail to respective owners and assessed persons within 120 to 800 meters of the property subject to the proposed applications, and to those persons and agencies likely to have an interest in the applications. These notices were sent at least 30 days prior to this morning's meeting. Included in each notice was an explanation of the purpose and effect of the proposed applications and a key map showing the location of the properties or a description of the lands to be affected of the proposed amendments. Other relevant information may also have been provided. These circulations were all provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act and the Township of Georgian Bay official plan. Members of the public are advised at this point that unless they make an oral or written submission to council before council makes a decision on these applications, that any subsequent appeal to the local planning appeals tribunal may be dismissed by the tribunal. Anyone who wishes to be notified of council's decision respecting the proposed zoning bylaw amendments must submit a written request to the clerk's office.
Thank you. To our planning department.
Good morning. Our two applications, I will be speaking on them in the same presentation. They're regarding lands located on Ava Island within the Cognishine Coastal Waterfront Community. As you can see here, they're located on Ava Island. So the first application, Z19-14, is in regards to lands, the vacant lot to the north. The purpose of the application is to change the zoning of the subject lands from the Shoreline Residential Island Type 5 Exception 12 zone to a site-specific Shoreline Residential Island Type 5 Exception 52 zone. So the effect of this amendment would be to to recognize a lot area of 5,993 square meters, recognize a lot frontage of 95 meters, permit a minimum front yard setback to a dwelling of 18 meters where 20 meters is required to the west, permit a minimum front yard setback to a dwelling of 15 meters where 16 meters is required, where 20 meters is required to the north, permit a minimum front yard setback to a deck of 14 meters where 16 meters is required, permit a maximum gross floor area of a dwelling of 233 square meters where 149.8 square meters is permitted, and to permit a maximum total lot coverage over the whole lot of 5.9% where 5% is permitted. And then the second application that we are speaking about today is Z19-15. So it is in regards to the already developed lot to the south. And this application proposes to change the zoning to a site-specific SRI 5-53 zone. And this site-specific zone would recognize a lot area of 9,734 square meters, recognize a lot frontage of 53.9 meters to the west and 145.3 meters to the east, recognize all legally existing structures, and permit a total of 2 sleeping cabins on the property. So here we have an aerial photo of the subject lands. So as you can see here, that the first application that I spoke to is in regards to the north lot that is currently vacant. And the second application that I spoke to is in regards to the lands that are already developed, which is the south lot. So this was the previous lot line prior to the application that previously went in front of the Committee of Adjustment. That was back in July, and so essentially what the application proposed in front of the applications are a condition of that approval, and that's why it is here in front of council. So here are just some photos of the subject lands. So here is the docking area that is located along the east shoreline. So this is what the currently developed lot uses as their main access. Here's a photo of the existing dwelling on that south lot. This is a photo looking from the developed lot towards the vacant area and the vegetation that does exist between the two lots. Here is the neighboring property to the south of the subject land. So this lot is not in, this dwelling is not in the ownership of the same owner of these two lots. However, just to show the large open rock face that this vacant lot is located on. And here's a photo of the west shoreline of the property. So this shoreline would essentially be, if these applications were to be approved, the new shoreline, main shoreline area for the vacant lot. And here's a photo standing approximately in the location that the proposed decrease in front yard setback would be for that new dwelling to be proposed. And some more existing vegetation on the vacant lot, buffering it from the already developed area on the island. And so the proposed amendments are conditions of approval regarding a consent application that was contemplated and approved by the Committee of Adjustment. The effect of these amendments would place each lot into a site-specific zone to recognize both existing and proposed development. Discussion between the applicant and the Township Building Department are continuing, and the Building Department has now been on site to the property. It is noted, or it should be noted, that the proposed septic location for the vacant lot has not yet been finalized or determined, and due to that, planning staff are reserving a recommendation at this point to council until that has been sorted out and the building department can provide further comments that they are comfortable and aware of where the proposed septic location is to be. So at this time, we are not, staff is not providing a recommendation. However, of course, it being a public meeting, we are welcome to any comments from the public or members of council. Thank you.
Thank you. Have we received any public response in writing?
Through your worship, the District of Muskoka has no objection provided on-site phosphorus management and impact mitigation measures are implemented. The Cognizant Cottagers Association is not opposed to the application but would like additional information regarding the proposed septic location.
Our single member of the public, do you wish to make any comment on this application? Thank you. I think with that, I will close the public portion of this meeting. Council, the normal pattern, if I understand correctly here, is this will go back to staff and we'll get a recommendation one way or another at a future meeting. So if there's any comments you'd like to make for them to take into consideration, now is a good opportunity. Councillor Cooper.
I read something over the weekend, I believe, that said the applicant wasn't going to be here today because they were asking for a deferral. Is that correct?
Through your worship, they are aware that they haven't finalized the septic location yet, and it is a very good chance that this application will need to be recirculated and another public meeting come forward to to council, I apologize. So they were not able to make the meeting, and they essentially were just allowing council to be aware that they are comfortable with there being no recommendation at this point, and they're aware of that.
So there will be another public meeting, is that correct?
So the south lot here, the already developed lands, that will not need any recirculation. If the proposed septic location, this is the area right here, as you can see, the proposed septic envelope here, that is the envelope that the building department wanted to go out on site because they were not comfortable with it as proposed in the application. So this may be recirculated, but that would be at a future meeting.
So a few other questions, if I may. So dealing with the existing lot and location, not existing, but realigned lot, where the buildings are, I did have one observation, and that is that it's under 1 hectare. Is that correct now? Wasn't, but it is now?
That is correct.
And is it my understanding that the Cognizant Community Plan requires that you have 1 hectare or 2.5 acres to have 2 sleeping cabins? Is that not correct?
Sorry, can you repeat that again? Under?
It is my understanding in the Cognizant Community Plan, in order to qualify to have
Yes.
2 sleeping cabins, you have to have 2.5 acres or 1 hectare.
Right, yes.
But they're asking to have 2.
Yes, so through your worship, the reasoning for that being included in the application is prior to the lot boundary adjustment that was conditionally approved by the committee, this lot did have enough lot area to allow for 2 sleeping cabins. There is currently 1. They were requesting to essentially maintain that right to 2 to allow for a future sleeping cabin, even though the lot boundary adjustment did decrease that lot area. That's why that is part of the application.
So I understand that they did qualify, and frankly, right now, they don't. So,
Right.
Are you asking for us to give approval for this and the extra sleeping cabin today?
Through your worship, I am not giving a recommendation for council to approve
On either of these?
No, I'm not.
Thank you. I just wanted to raise that because it's sort of been another line in the sand in the Cognizant Community Plan, including the size of the sleeping cabins, and the number of them is pretty much what we've stuck with. And so that's my comment. Second, on the other property, the second property, the lot area that we're talking about, I believe you wrote in your report, does not include the north portion because, in fact, it's a separate shoal.
Through your worship, you are correct, yes. The lot area that we used in that lot area.
Thank you.
Any other comments, Councillor? Councillor Bocha.
Victoria, when you're saying on the south lot that the new zoning is to recognize the existing dwellings, your description of existing dwellings, does that include shore platforms and docks as they stand today? Or your report says existing structures. Does that include the docks and shore platforms and everything?
Through your worship, yes, it would include the existing dock system that they have.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Yanko.
If you would indulge me on some questions, can you go to the photograph of the island?
Sure. The aerial, sorry?
Yeah, Ariel, yeah, oh, yours is different than mine.
Oh.
Typical. There seems to be a lot of lines on there. How many properties are there? It looks like there's like 4 properties.
So-
Maybe you outline each one of them. I can see 2 of them.
Sure, so if you don't mind, So prior to the consent application that went forward, these were always 2 separate lots of record.
Right.
What essentially the application proposed is this lot to be adjusted, which why in that one photo it
Okay.
does look a little piecemeal, so the new proposed lot boundary would be this. There is no creation of any additional lots.
Okay, now below that, are there 2 lots?
In here?
No, below that, are there 2 other lots? So there's 4 lots on this island?
I believe so, yes, there's a total of 4.
Okay, and then,
Yeah.
yeah, and go to the top. That section to the north,
Yes.
that is not part of the building envelope?
Through your worship, no, it is not. That's a separate.
Okay, can you go to your first slide you had?
Sure.
Oh, okay, the next one.
Okay.
Okay, so it looks like to me, and I don't want to be critical, too critical here, but it looks like to me that they want to build an oversized dwelling, 233 square meters, where 149.8 is permitted. And in doing that, they have to get a bunch of variances. In other words, they're going to be closer to the water in a number of areas. So here's an example where we have an undersized lot, big cottage, therefore require variances. And I have a real problem with that. I think if people buy a lot, they should build according to the regulations. And if it happens to be smaller than they want, so be it. They made a small lot. So I have problems with this application. I don't know if my fellow councilors from the Bay have a problem, but I have a problem with people buying these small lots and wanting to build a big cottage and therefore require a bunch of variances. So I really have trouble supporting the creation of this new lot.
If I may, through your worship, so thank you for your comments, and so there is no, it is a bit of a difficult scenario here where they're not, this lot has always existed. As you can see, this is the original lot line. The reason why the lot adjustment happened is, as you can see, it is a difficult lot in the sense of meeting those types of setbacks. This was not a lot creation, it is an existing lot of record, and based on the Cognizine plan, it is able to be developed. However, of course, as you mentioned, they would be required to get some setback minimized, and that's just why the application's in front of council.
And if I may, just before I let, I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that first application, 14, all those variance requests was for a building that already exists. Is that correct?
To your worship, that is for the vacant lot,
Oh.
the one that had the more variances requested.
Okay, sorry, I got them. Appreciate that, thank you. Councilor Yanko, back to you.
Just going back to that slide.
Yeah.
So if they kept, next one.
Oh, sorry.
Well, no, maybe that previous.
Sorry?
No, the next one, the one with the writing on it. No.
Sorry.
There.
There we
yeah.
go.
My question is,
Yeah.
if they actually build at 149.8,
Yes.
150 square meters,
Yes.
would they need any additional variances? And that's what really bothers me, is that if they built to the right size, then I would consider variances. But when you get oversized and you need a whole bunch of variances, I have a real problem with that, because we're having the same problem on my lake, where people are buying the small lots
Right.
and building the big homes and asking for a lot of variances. And I think that's a whole philosophy these days, is to buy, pay as little as possible for the smallest lot,
Okay.
and put as much building on it and get all the variances you can.
Yep.
So I have a problem with that.
Through your worship, I just wanted to make one more comment that if they were to reduce the size and meet the maximum gross floor area. If you can see here, there is a hydro line that runs right through the main location of the lot. So I would foresee that they would still potentially request some front yard setback, what have you, but just to clarify your question. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Jarvis.
A couple things. I want everybody's attention to the CCA note that came in as part of the correspondence, and they're saying, based on our discussions, we asked this agreement comes with a restriction of no buildings on Part 1, Lot North, which is, I presume, that vacant property. Is that correct? No. Oh, they're talking about that piece up there, the peninsula.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
exactly.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification. Then one other question is, I'm seeing where Councillor Rianco is coming from on this. When I was looking at the survey that's on the screen now, I was having trouble because there's no shoreline indicated at the bottom of the screen, which would be what I would call the western shoreline. So I'm curious to know how that lot is set up, both lots, as a matter of fact, relative on the survey to that western or southwestern shoreline. And two, why can't, if that lot currently is undersized, they cannot move the lot line that's showing the dotted line, the proposed dotted line to the left of the screen can't be moved over further to the, I'd say, northwest. I'm having trouble with, well, I'm having a lot of trouble reading this on my computer to begin with, but I'm trying to figure out where the shoreline is to the southwest and why they can't move their property line either closer out to that shore or out to the northwest.
Through your worship, I assume that you were referring to essentially why couldn't the line be more along that way? So of course the severance portion, or the lot adjustment portion of this application was dealt with at committee. But for some further clarification, I believe it was the intent of the owner to allow for this lot to maintain access to the west as well, due to this being kind of the higher traffic area, to allow them to still have some frontage along the west as well. Shoreline.
Again, just point for clarification, how much property then is there between the proposed southwest lot line, that short little one, and the shoreline?
Sorry,
No, yeah, the little short, the shoreline.
that I do believe is 10. Through your worship, I believe it is 10 meters that they are proposing as separation to allow for pedestrian access to go through. Yep.
Councillor Cooper.
Just a couple of points of clarification, and this is supposition a little bit, but I think to answer Councillor Jarvis's question, I think what the owners were trying to do was allow access to that bay to the west, because that's the only spot, if they were to have a dock on the west side, that they'd actually have protection. If they were to make that a little bit more square, shall we say, and move the line inward, the problem would be that they'd lose the chance of using that bay. So I think that's why they sort of have almost like a pathway to the western side of the island. I think that was the rationale. As far as the size of the cottage, oversize of the cottage, I think I'd be happy to discuss that at the time that we're considering it, but I sort of agree with Councillor Wianco that it's pretty big request. But the other point I'd make to you, just for clarification for everybody, is if you could go to the picture that shows the lot lines, the previous lot lines.
Sure.
So just for everybody, so Ava Island has one cottage to the north. That's where Art in the Rocks is held, if anybody's ever been to that. And then two lots to the south, one to the southwest and one to the southeast. And I think the other point I'd make is that this is obviously taken in low water. You can see where the lot lines are versus what you're seeing there. And so this is 2012, 2013, something like that, even 2014. So it's quite deceiving. Or misleading, I guess, is not that you're trying to do that. I'm just suggesting that for our own clarification that it's quite a bit smaller than, I can tell you on Sunday it'd be even smaller than that. So there you go. Thank you.
Any other comments from any councillors? Councillor Yanko.
Just, what are all these things here? There's something there, there's something there, something there. Like, is this thing already built up somewhat?
So through your worship, this area here is a platform, I believe I have a photo of it. As I was speaking to before with Councillor Cooper's question about the two separate areas that are above the high water mark, this is an existing, essentially, path to get over the small area that water rushes through, kind of a bridged area. And that has been on the island for a very long time and would be considered a legal structure. I don't see Ariel. This docking area in this bay on this photograph, when I was at the site, those were not there. I'm not sure if those were maybe just, yeah, that they were just temporary, but the main structure is that footpath area, and I do believe that there is a small 10 by 10 shed on the property. Again, it's been there forever, and I don't believe that the applicants are looking to maintain that.
And is there a cottage to the north of all that? Yes.
Through your worship, yes. I don't know if you can see it in there. It's hard. They're kind of similar to the rock colors, but yes, there is a cottage.
Councillor Cooper.
I just had a look at the picture up close. I think they store their docks up in that bay, and that's why they're just sort of anchored and held offshore during the winter months, and they probably weren't installed at this juncture. That's all that is. It's not, I don't think there are any docks in there, actually.
Councillor Bochek.
Victoria, the reason this is in front of us is because obviously there was too many variances to hit the Committee of Adjustments, and so it's been brought to council. My question is, to lump all these variances into one approval when it comes before us, there may be certain aspects of this that we would approve and others that we wouldn't approve. So will we have the opportunity to send back a conditional, not an approval, but conditions, and be able to defer it until we receive something from them that say that they accept the conditions?
So through your worship, just to clarify that because these applications previously went to the Committee of Adjustment for the lot boundaries, the condition was made for them to be put in a site-specific zone to better control the proposed and existing developments. When it comes to the specific variances being requested, that is only in front of council because staff required it to be through the zoning. That isn't to say that a potential minor variance in the future, they couldn't apply for that. When it comes to taking all the comments today in the sense of, whether they should alter their application or not, as I previously mentioned, staff have not come up with a recommendation yet, and further comments will be provided to the applicant to see if they would potentially be willing to either alter their application before it comes back for approval, based on comments from both staff and council. So I do believe that when this application comes back to council, there may very well be an adjustment based on comments today and also our review of policy once we go through that.
Okay, subsequent to that, I can see where a boundary change and maybe the addition of another sleeping cabinet would be in front of us, but some of these are fairly minor in nature. You have a 2-meter difference on a setback, on a front yard setback, which is something I think should be reviewed by the Committee of Adjustments. So we've bundled them all together here and presented it to council for approval, where I'm not sure, some of it shouldn't have come to council for approval, and then the minor variances went to the Committee of Adjustments. I know it's been there already as a consent item,
Yes.
but not as an approval process. So I just probably ask you, as far as the question goes, why is it all bundled together and brought to council?
Right, so through your worship, the existing zoning on the property is already a site-specific zone. So when the applicants proposed to alter that property and propose new development, it was appropriate that staff felt it appropriate that they required to be continued to be placed in a site-specific zoning that we can only do through council.
So currently this does not hold the SR zoning. It's already been amended once to allow what's currently there, and we're amending an amendment, I guess.
So all of Ava Island has a similar site-specific zone on it.
Okay.
And that is why it is that SRI 5-12.
And that was approved in our lifetime?
Sure.
Yeah, just through your worship, for a point of clarification, SRI 5-12, I believe, came into effect when the Cognishine plan and the Cognishine documents were prepared. It was part of that document that was prepared by Planscape.
Okay.
And then, just in terms of your question, why don't some of the variances go to committee and then the bigger ones come to council? Why didn't we separate it out? It's not standard to do that. It's standard. If you've got a consent application, that obviously goes to the committee. But where there's multiple changes to the bylaw proposed, whether it's performance standards like lot-specific requirements or a change in zone, those would get lumped in together and be dealt with by one body. In this case, it was such that it needed to be dealt with by council. So it's not really, I would say, good practice or common to deal with some variances for one application at committee and then others at council. Then you could end up with, for example, if there were appeals, you'd end up with 2 different appeals, 2 different decisions. We deal with them all at once. So that's why it was lumped together and this brought to council.
Thank you.
Councillor Douglas.
Victoria, will the public be re-notified again once you work with, or does it depend on what the changes are?
So through your worship, if, for instance, the applicants do need to include an additional setback for a septic system, which is something that may occur for the north lot, that would have to be recirculated. If there is changes to the north lot, the south lot application would not necessarily be recirculated.
Council, I think we've given the planning department quite a bit of homework. If there's anything else you want to add to their research, now's your time. Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll apply to this or maybe just for any future applications. I would have really liked to have seen the proposed lot line showing on a map like this so I can get it in relation to the south property as well.
Sure.
It just would make more sense. I was having trouble putting everything together, especially with the survey being cut off. Thank you.
Before we do the motion? Okay. Given that there are no more questions, we will close the public meeting. We already did close, didn't we not close it? Well, let's close the public meeting. Okay. Just to confirm, we've closed the public meeting because we should have. And the motion in front of me reads, be it resolved that council directs staff to consider the public comments received for Z19/14 and Z19/15, 6 and 10 Island 23060, and prepare a recommendation report and a bylaw that will be brought back to a subsequent council meeting for consideration. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Staff reports. Over to our acting CAO.
All right. So this report, I've been working on this file since 2014, so I'm very excited to finally have it in front of you. So in 2014, Council of the Day directed staff to complete a land swap with the owner of the Delawana Resort. I have circled the parts that the owner of the Delawana received. These are pieces of show road allowance. These 2 are the ones that were approved, so this is separate from this land swap. So the owner received ownership of those 4 parcels of show road allowance in order to get permits to repair structures that were located on the parcels. This is the survey showing the parts that we are getting of Honey Harbor Road down here. So we're getting this section of Honey Harbor Road. And we are also getting this section of Honey Harbor Road. And here's that started. So this finalizes a very lengthy process. It was directed by Council of the Day to complete this process. It just happened to take quite some time. And we have no concerns with this application, and it's not a public meeting, but this bylaw is required to be passed in order to just finalize the land swap, and so that the township can own the portions of Honey Harbor Road that we already maintain and take care of. We will be working with the owner of the Delawana with additional issues after this. For instance, this part 2 here, that leads right to the boat launch. He currently still owns that. There is this part here that is not involved in the land swap at all. And there is also this North Beach area. So those are 3 parcels that we're sort of going to be working together with the applicant on in the future, but this was the first step to get this done and over with, and then move ahead and move forward from here.
Thank you.
Councilor Cooper.
Councilor Cooper, followed by Councilor Jarvis.
So, thank you, Jessica, for that report, and I was going to ask about the beach area that we had talked at one point being available to the public. I'm not sure where that's going in these discussions, but I know that there had been some discussion about that. Can you comment about that?
So when that was maybe a 3-year ago conversation, good memory. And so it's township land, so the public can access it if they get there by boat. But there's no actual right-of-way for members of the public to drive there and access it. So that was one of the other issues that we were going to be discussing.
In the future?
In the future.
So at the moment, though, okay, so it's township land or Shore Road allowance, I guess, owned by the, but I'm a little uncomfortable only in that I see we've cleared up some of the road issues, but we've got the launch ramp issue and the road right before it, as I understand it. So there are 3, you pointed out 3 parcels. I don't recall what the third one was.
There was that one there going to the boat launch.
Yes.
And then there was this one right here.
Oh, yes, okay, so that's sort of at the end of the road, Honey Harbor Road and so forth. So, I wonder if we lose some of our opportunity to negotiate by doing this piecemeal. And I understand it'd be nice to settle some of this, but I'd like to see it all settled. Those are my comments at the moment anyway. Otherwise, we may not be in the same position when we get to those final pieces.
Pursuant to Councillor Cooper's comments, which actually almost answered all my questions, is can you give us some idea of where we are in negotiating? And the boat ramp's a concern of mine since I've had questions about it. When people accessing, boat access cottages need that ramp. And I know I gather it needs some repair work, and what's the point in repairing something you can't get access to? So I understand that. And pursuant to that, I was going to ask about the beach, but I see that's already is being dealt with on a separate matter. But I agree with Councilor Cooper. Is there some way we can sort of leverage all this now as opposed to waiting until it's maybe we're not in a position to be able to negotiate in a way that would work for us?
We are not in negotiations at all about the other parcels. So this was previously approved. We just needed the surveys to be agreed upon between staff and the owner of the Delawana, and it just happened to take quite a bit of time. We still own property, and the owner still owns property in this area that I feel confident that we can work together to come up with some sort of agreement, and then we would be coming back to council for additional approval to move forward. But right now, we're just trying to get this one out of the way, but I do understand your concerns.
Councillor Hazelton, followed by Councillor Cooper.
Just a point of clarification, if you could help with it. You have the one drawing where there are a bunch of green blocks along the shoreline, probably farther up in your, there we go, there's one example of a green block. So What does the green represent?
The green represents an MNRF land use.
Okay, so what we're talking about there is the road turns to the right, and there's, what, 50 feet of road that is privately owned, and then there's an MNRF land lease, water lot lease?
Yes, water lot lease.
Okay. Thank you.
Council Cooper, followed by Council Bocheck.
Yeah, so another thing that sort of is occurring to me is that I think we need to put quite a bit of value on this launch ramp and the dockage there and so forth. And the reason I mention this is that we're about to have to deal with some pretty serious matters as it pertains to garbage and garbage collection. And I know that in some of the communities on coastal Georgian Bay, they have actually boat access, garbage, solid waste opportunities to drop off their garbage, and also they can either go by car or by boat. And this is one of the few places that we have in Honey Harbor that I consider to be pretty important in terms of maybe the possibility of that in the future. And in fact, didn't we just buy the school property? Is that correct?
That's upcoming.
It's upcoming, thank you. But we're going to need, I think, looking to the future, we're going to need some sort of access point and also a staffed bin site, because I think the province is saying you can't have unstaffed bin sites. So there's going to be a big issue for us, and I would hate to give up any sort of opportunity / leverage by this step one, and I'm concerned that it might impact step two. So I'm just a little bit nervous about giving up our opportunities. Thank you.
Councilor Bocheck, you had your hand raised?
Yes. I tend to agree with Councilor Cooper on this, that my fear is that the remaining parcels of land that could be involved in the land swap for the road access to the launch ramp are going to be problematic in that they're isolated and no access to those. I'll give you an example, would be the North Beach. The North Beach is a great piece of property in that cove, and we own that currently, but we have no access to it, and the public has no access to it. If we give up negotiations on that piece of property, or if we continue to gain access to that property, that piece of property down by that boat ramp, the road access, becomes more and more valuable as a negotiating tool. And my fear is that we could be held hostage on that small piece of road leading down to that launch ramp, and we're not going to get our fair value in the land swap. I understand that everything that's before us today we've been reviewing this for years and years and years, and I understand the deal that's on the table today. I'm just worried that we're not going to have enough bargaining power in the future to obtain that piece of property that we really want. That's just a comment, and probably doesn't need an answer, but if you have something, I'd appreciate it.
I just want to clarify. So we do not have access to the North Beach, but the people who stay at the Delawana do, because there is a road that goes there. It's just that we don't have a right-of-way for members of the public to go and access the beach. So I feel it is a very important parcel of land that the Delawana should own, so they can own their beach. These 4 parts here are already in their ownership. So it's not like we can take any of those away right now. So I was just clarifying that. Also, in the future, because we have so many things ongoing of discussions with the owner, he would also like ownership of some of this down here, because there are 3 cottages and their pieces of their septic are on the northern part of the Shore Road allowance. So he requires ownership of a little bit of that as well, and he's aware of that.
That's where our waterfront plan is for the
Yes.
promenade?
Yes, it's not the entire Shore Road allowance, the waterfront plan. So we would hopefully go into conversations with him purchasing little sections of it so that the septics are then fully on his property. So he's aware he needs ownership of some of that as well.
I don't know if I have this all in order, but I saw Councillor Wienko, I see Councillor Douglas, I see Councillor Cooper, so let's do it in that order at this point, please. Yes, sorry, Councillor Wienko first.
Yeah, I'm kind of following things here and tend to agree. But the question I have is why won't he sell that piece down to the boat launch? Like, it's so easy. He's given us 90% of the road. He's holding 10% back. There's got to be a reason why he's holding 10% back. And so that to me means he's not really bargaining in good faith. I could see getting access to the beach. That could probably be done over the years. He could probably negotiate something. I don't think we can hold that to ransom. The issues down by the Delawana Road, I could see that being. But this issue going to the boat launch sounds like he's trying to hold the ace on this whole thing, and that bothers me. Just that little one piece, that what bothers me the most. And so if he gave that as part of this program, I would approve what we have in front of us today. But that 50 feet or whatever you call it, sounds like that's his ace, and that bothers me.
Councillor Douglas?
I'm in agreement with this as well. I mean, the boat launch, can you just clarify for me who owns the boat launch right now?
So we've been going through this again for years.
I know.
And the agreement is something that we can't locate because the township does not own the actual ramp. I'm trying to remember exactly who does. But the fact that he owns the road going right up to it, he could charge people to cross it to get to the launch. He could charge people to park there on the side of the road because he owns it. We can't force anyone to give up land. Well, we could, but that's another story.
Okay, if I may just continue on that vein, I would like to know the information exactly around that because I think that's a hugely important piece for the public to be able to access that boat launch. Absolutely.
Councillor Cooper?
Jessica, did I hear you say that you thought the owner of the Delawana should get the beach? Is that what you said? Pardon me?
Yes, I did.
And why?
Because we don't have access to it.
So why wouldn't we negotiate to get access to it?
We could, but then we have nothing really else to use for negotiating.
That's the whole point of this discussion today is that we're maybe throwing away some leverage things. It would be my point. And, you know, there's some very fine points here that probably we should think about in the background. But, you know, the beach versus the road in front of the cottages, I could sort of see as fair game. And as far as the ramp is concerned, I'm with everybody else here. I'm not getting it. I don't know why why that little portion is being held up, and we're lacking a little bit of information. Who owns the dock at the launching ramp would be another question I'd ask, and what do we own down there, if anything, at the ramp area?
Nothing.
We have nothing. Well, then I think we want this though, because isn't it the only public launching area in Honey Harbor?
It is.
That's pretty big stuff. Thank you.
If I may, a couple things. I believe that this whole land swap was negotiated years ago.
Yes, it was.
And the council at the time approved these particular sections of the land, were
That's
not
correct.
the actual little piece. So I think that's one thing we have to take into account, that we're basically now trying to complete a deal that was negotiated years ago. Secondly, I think if he were to try to in any way block that launch ramp, he'd have a huge legal issue, not only with us, but all the people who use it, because they've been using it for so many years. Just like, even though we didn't own it, the Honey Harbor Road has been a public road forever and treated as such, even though he owned it. So I do believe that the negotiations going forth, after this is done, there is more than enough things that the current owner of the Delawana wants, and there's certainly things that we want, and so I think we can still have fruitful discussions and negotiation going forward with what remains. And with that, Councillor Douglas.
I think you're correct on that. I think under the Roads Act, there would be a problem for him to block that from the public access because it's been used for years. But I think we should know that information going in. And when you say that he already owns the circled areas, how does that end up being a land swap then if he already owns them? Owns
So,
them?
that was an error done by the lawyers.
Oh.
So they registered it on title prior to the land swap being completed.
Oh.
So he already owns, technically, those 4 pieces of land.
Yes, there was an error made a number of years ago, and therefore the land swap was half done, and so now we want to get the other half done.
If I can just finish off on my vein of thought there, I wondered how that was, it didn't really make sense what you were saying there, but that clarifies that. I am of the mind of the same as our mayor here, that I don't think he would have a right under the Roads Act, and if anybody has a question on that, maybe staff can bring that back to us and
Yeah, we can
clarify
definitely look into that.
There's within a time frame that if it's being used for many, many years, it will automatically become public.
I think it's 20,
Yeah. it
but I
is
can
20.
verify that for
It
council.
has something to do with the titles on properties and so on, but I don't know that we should hold this up. If it's already been something that we've done, we certainly have some other things that we could work with, maybe with Conrad, and he is a good community member. In good faith, I don't know that we should hold this up, although I do agree about the launch. We want to make sure we're okay with that one.
Councillor Yanko.
Well, first of all, I think I've been around maybe too long, but in all the discussions I've had, or at least I've been involved in over the years, access to the boat ramp was always number one. So this idea of taking out 50 feet or whatever the distance is, I think that's a strategic move by the owner. So if the township can come back to us and say, he cannot block that road up, or the owner agrees to throw that 50 feet into this into this approval, I have no problem approving it. But as long as we can get unfettered access to that boat launch, if the township and the lawyers of the township can agree that we can get unfettered access to that boat ramp, then I will approve this the way it sits right now. But until that little issue is resolved, I have a problem proving it today. But if you can get me something to us by the next council meeting about that 50 feet, then I will approve it. But I think that's where I stand right now. I don't know what kind of game is being played here. If he really wants this right now, give us the 50 feet. What's stopping him? You know?
So the original agreement with the previous council was that we would only deal with this section right here.
I don't agree. I was involved in those discussions, and it was always getting access to that boat launch was a key thing. I never agreed that part 2 there should be taken out of the negotiations.
It was never in the negotiations, that's the thing. We talked about access to the water, we talked about access to the boat launch.
I don't know.
Okay,
Anyway.
I'm going to let everybody have another kick at this, but we're going on a little bit in circles, but Councillor Bocek, followed by Councillor Cooper.
Okay, a few things have arisen here, and one that our mayor has brought to our attention, that the right of passage on that portion of land has been there for years and years, and they wouldn't be able to take it away from us. Well, that goes for the whole road, if that's the case. We don't need to be doing this swap. If we have access to that whole road, and we can have future access to the whole road, then why are we giving up all that property when we already have access to that road? So I don't believe that's true. The ownership of that 50 feet, are we 100% sure that ownership resides with the Delawana Inn? The boat ramp itself, we know that the docks on the east side are owned by the former Jerry Staun's Marine. They are not ours, they're not the Delawana's, they actually belong to the Staun property. The ramp on the west side, or sorry, the dock on the west side, which services the launch ramp, do we know who owns that?
I am not aware, no.
Okay. the actual shore road allowance that that boat ramp is on, do we know who owns that?
There is. So it's Crown.
It's Crown, okay. So would we not simply seek permission from the Crown to have that, a long-term lease for the township on that launch ramp?
Could look into that.
I think that would be imperative. Because if we have nothing on the leeward side of that 50 meters of road or 50 feet of road, if there's nothing there for us to even own or lease or have access to, I don't think we're in a very good negotiating position when it comes to trying to acquire that piece. So I think we need to, before we make a decision on that section of road, it's not anything to do with today, but we need full clarification on that whole parcel of land down at the waterfront there. Who owns what and what's available for us to acquire?
Councillor Cooper.
Just, I'd like to say that there's a lot of questions here, particularly about the ownership of the launch ramp. And I'm taking it then, if the launch ramp is owned by the federal government, we may be the case here, I'm not sure, but I think we really need to get clarification, A, about that, and B, what sort of arrangements can we make with the government to ensure that for the many years in the future that we have access to this. And I frankly don't want to vote in favor of this today until such time as we get some answers to this particular question. Thank you.
Councillor Douglas.
Okay, everybody's working on the same vein here, but if staff's coming back to us with a report on ownership and so on, could you also bring back to us what the Roads Act, actually the implication of the Roads Act is? Because I've just recently been dealing with this, and I can tell you that there is something within the Roads Act, excuse me, that if this road is being used for a certain period of time by people that can only access this, their properties by this ramp, that there is something there. So I would like to see that come back to us.
Okay.
Maybe an opinion from the lawyer as to where we stand with that. Thank you.
Councillor Jarvis.
So,
Followed by Councillor Hazel.
so clarification then, we're talking about a swap on SRA land that the owner of the Dell already owns. Correct? Yeah, I've got that right.
Yeah.
Okay, so he already owns the land, and so we're negotiating. I think it's kind of interesting, actually. We're getting something for something that we don't need to get anything for, I guess the way I'm putting it. If he by right owns that land anyway, we're just trying to formalize that ownership with this swap. Is that correct? Okay. Theoretically, I don't have any objection to. And I think that's pretty, when I first looked at this, I thought it was a pretty great idea, but I just didn't realize right off the bat that, of course, the land going to the ramp was not part of it, and that's rather unfortunate. I am confident in staff's ability to negotiate further on this. I hope we have that in writing somewhere. So I'd be happy to allow this to go, but I do think that it would be critical for us. The two things, the two portions there are the ramp, access to, ownership of, and in thinking along Councillor Cooper's lines, that beach access, I don't know how that could be negotiated, but that's a much better beach for us to have access to for the public standpoint than the current bit of property down along the where the waterfront plan is taking place. So I don't know how we can work that one out, but I'd like to see something like that going on. Having said all that, again, I'm confident in staff's ability to negotiate this, and I think that for the sake of getting things cleaned up, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to sort this one out sooner rather than later.
Councillor Hazelton.
I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit differently. First of all, on the topic of the beach, when we sat through the strategic plan for the hamlet of Honey Harbor, and we talked about beach access for the people of the community, there was generally agreed that having a private operator operate the beach and provide the locals with free access to that, just like we provide locals free access to the park in Port Severn, was probably a better strategy than trying to have the town own and manage a beach. And so I'm certainly in favor of the beach finding its way to be part of that Delawana property, and hopefully we can work with the operator of the property to make that a beach that could be available, and that would be that would certainly fit with the strategic plan that we put together for the hamlet of Honey Harbor. Secondly, I did want to point out that we now know from what we've heard today that there are some cottages along the Delawana Road that need access, and I'm already getting flack from community members who see cars accessing that road, and yet the public is no longer able to access that road, and yet it's all on township property. So I think that we have a significant concern as a township where we have a township shore road allowance, we have a road that is a township road, the Delawana Road, and that road is now being used privately, and we are not we're not seeing any benefits, if you will, for our people in our community. In fact, all the benefits of people using that road have been shut off and blocked off. And so I think that from a go-forward position, I think we have to raise that topic very significantly, such that if there is going to be road access to those cottages, that the public understands why, how, and how the Delawana owner has acquired the appropriate access rights to that land, because the community's been shut off and not the Delawana guests. Thank you.
I'd like to bring this back into what's actually in front of us. There's no question that the North Beach is not in front of us. The boat ramp is not in front of us. The Delawana Road is not in front of us. And there's also no question that they will be in front of us sometime in the not too distant future. There's definitely negotiation that has to take place in regards to all those features, because both the township and the current owner of the Delawana have interests in various outcomes that are possible, and those negotiations are ongoing. What is in front of us was a land swap that was agreed to quite a few years ago, that was moved forward with significant delay in waiting to get the proper surveys done and things like that, and which we've discovered, unfortunately, what we were giving up, we've already given up legally, though we should not have done it at that time, but it has been done. And we are just now trying to get what we wanted to get in that agreement, which was the Honey Harbor Road, portions of it that were owned by the Delawana. So I think it's very good that we've had this discussion, so that I think there's no doubt in staff's mind what our concerns are. But what is in front of us is simply a decision of whether or not we will pass the bylaw and go through the legal actions that will have the ownership of a significant portion of Honey Harbor Road transferred to the township from the Delawana. And so I don't want us to not approve that when that is actually just the final step in a deal that was already made. Though I fully appreciate everybody's concerns that we have to pay close attention to the future negotiations. Okay, one last round briefly from everyone, if necessary, and then I will call the vote. Councillor Wojcik.
I'm going to do my own little summary, as I often do on this, and council gave direction to staff to enter into agreement with the Delawana to do a land swap. As that proceeded forward, our hired legal team of Hacker Janak Rice went ahead and did half of the deal and deeded the portions of the Delawana as giving them ownership without completing the deal and giving us the road. So currently, the Delawana Inn owns all the land in the swap, and we got nothing in return due to a mistake by our lawyers. So what we're doing here, my understanding is now, is completing the deal. Have I read all these conversations right? Yes. Okay. So it's simply that the deal is half done, our lawyers made a mistake, and we didn't get our half of the deal. And now the simple solution is to have council pass a resolution that completes the deal. I'm still thinking about that, to know if we're just giving in and it's not our fault. So I'll leave that, now that I understand what transpired over the last few years, and know that it was our direction that we do this swap, and it only got halfway done, and the Delawana owns their property and we don't own our property. Thank you.
Councillor Douglas?
I don't have any problem with what's on the table right now and agreeing to that, because I think clearly the Delawana has already got their portion. And I also don't think we have as big an issue with the boat launch when I think about this, because of the Roads Act. And it would be in the best interest probably of the owners of the Delawana to do some sort of a swap for that small piece of land, because if the Roads Act does in fact state that it is usable, the Delawana is going to have to maintain that piece of road. I would think they would want to not have to do that with traffic and boat launches and so on. So I don't see it a problem. I would support today's motion.
Councillor Jarvis?
Yeah, just following up the comments of the two previous councillors, I'm in total agreement. I think we should follow this through, but I'd like it to be duly recorded that council is very much interested in that access to the boat ramp in future negotiations. And then a resolution to what's going on with the Delawana Road specifically, and I'm not sure how we feel about this, but I think there's been some concern about some sort of access, whether it's via the CAG agreements or whatever with that North Beach. But I think just so long as staff is fully aware of our concerns that way, I'm happy to go ahead with this.
The motion reads, be it resolved that Council adopts bylaw 2019-103, which authorizes the township to swap parts 1, 3, 6, and 7 on Plan 35R-24836 with the Delawana-owned Part 1 on 35R-26009 and Parts 4, 5, and 6 on Plan 35R-26013. Recorded vote.
Councillor Cooper has requested a recorded vote. Councillor Cooper, how do you vote?
No.
Councillor Douglas, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Hazelton, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Jarvis, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Wayanko, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Bocek, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mayor Kutsier, how do you vote?
Yes.
Let the record show the motion is passed.
Thank you. Okay. We have one more item to, before, can we do one more item and then close the planning council? Is that, can you last that long? If not, I'm happy to grant it. Okay, let's take a 5-minute recess and let's not extend that past the 5-minute mark. Thank you. Okay, council, in front of us now is Planning Committee appointment. And this is who we would like to nominate to the Planning Committee to replace Councillor Cooper. And so I'm open to discussion on this matter. Councillor Jarvis.
Acknowledging that this needs to be done soon, today, I guess. I'd be very happy to have, to nominate Councillor Hazelton for that committee position.
Councillor Cooper.
I would just like to reinforce the concept that we need a councillor on this committee from essentially the two areas of Georgian Bay, Township, coastal Georgian Bay and inland lake areas and rural areas. So that's my comment. I think we need to have somebody to represent those two areas. Thank you.
Councillor Bocek.
Being that I resigned from the planning committee, I would not accept a nomination to sit on that committee because of a conflict of interest that I have with that committee. Just for clarification, sitting on that committee as a councillor currently is Councillor Wianco. Yes. So we currently have Councillor Wianco, who represents the district of Muskoka in 3 and 4. I'm sorry, in 1 and 3. So I think we should have representation from 2 and 4, and I'll leave it at that.
Which means that we got Councillor Hazelton or Councillor Jarvis as our candidates, and nobody has mentioned Councillor Jarvis. I wasn't inviting nomination. Any discussion on, any further discussion? Because, Councillor Douglas, thank you.
I'll nominate Councillor Jarvis. I would like to nominate.
Does Councillor Jarvis accept that?
Well, this was my next question. Councillors Jarvis and Hazelton, if you each would comment on your level of interest in this, your nominations, I think might be appropriate. I'll start with Councillor Jarvis because you already have your mic on.
Thank you. I have a keen interest in planning, obviously. My reasons for nominating Councillor Hazelton is that I know for a fact that his background in planning is significantly better than my own, and therefore the opportunity to get things done a little bit more quickly, as opposed to me sitting there trying to learn the whole process. I think we're better off with that consideration, that's all.
Councillor Hazelton.
Yes, I'm very interested, and I've spent many, many years on the kind of a tangent, if you will, to planning matters, involved with them, but not at a township level, but participating in planning reviews and so on. So I think I have a lot to offer in that area. Thank you.
Councillor Wojcik.
Appointed portfolios and committees is something that went by the wayside during this term of council. It was always an appointment. I guess the reason for the appointment is so that a specific or an individual councillor did not sit on multiple committees while others sat on no committees. And so, just for a point of clarity, if someone could tell me the committees currently that Councillor Jarvis is sitting on, I'm sorry?
Library.
The library, and Councillor Hazelton sits on which committees?
Library.
The library. Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? I have in front of me a motion that has not actually been signed by anyone, and it has a blank after the very last name. Maybe that's why nobody wanted to sign it yet. So, Councillor Jarvis, I'm going to have to ask you: are you willing to stand, or are you saying no because you prefer Councillor Hazelton?
Well, that's a complicated question.
I know it is.
My preference would be Councillor Hazelton to stand. Again, it's something I'd be interested in, but I think the better process for me, going down the road here, is to look at Committee of Adjustment first, and then move from there into planning if that's possible. So I would rather it was Councillor Hazelton that was taking that position. I don't know if that means I have to say I'm not willing, but I leave that up to council.
Okay. All right. I'm going to survey council before I write down a name here and say who, if they have any preferences or not as we go forward. And I'll start with Councillor Cooper and just go in order. Councillor Cooper.
Well, I nominated Councillor Hazelton, and I would support and vote in favor of his accepting that position.
Councillor Bocek.
I haven't made a decision yet, unfortunately. If you could move on.
I will. Councillor Hazelton.
I'm willing to stand and appreciate the recommendation.
Councillor Douglas.
Well, I would say either of the nominees would be suitable to cover the area, so I can't really give an answer on that.
Councillor Jarvis, I think you've already spoken, but you get one more time.
Councillor Hazelton.
Councillor Yankum.
I have no problem with Councillor.
I'm going to write in Councillor Hazelton's name and ask somebody to move and second this.
I'm happy to move that.
Do you need a signature?
Perhaps it'd be better if
Oh, sorry.
Okay. And then we'll see whether you survive the vote.
I have my name on this.
Okay, the motion reads, be it resolved the council adopts bylaw 2019-106 to appoint public members to the planning committee and to include the appointment of Councillor Rienko and Councillor Hazelton. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 anyway. Carried. Be it resolved, the council adopts bylaw 2019-107, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the October 15th, 2019 Planning Council meeting. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Be it resolved, the Planning Council does now adjourn at 10:31 a.m. until Tuesday, November 12th, 2019 at 9 a.m. or at the call of the chair. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Council, I would like to call the council, the regular council agenda meeting to order at 10:32. As you know from your agenda, we have a number of closed session items, and I think that's what we will move into initially. Though I will comment to you that we do have a delegation at 1 o'clock, and we have a development service report at 1:30. So if we do not have the close completed before we take a lunch break, we will do the remainder of the closed session afterwards. So we might, the agenda might fall in order, or it might get a little out of order, but with that, I'm sure you have I have to first ask if anybody has any declaration of pecuniary interest with regards to the agenda in front of us. I don't see any hands raised. And then as you know, there's a lengthy motion, and it's all been written down, so I'm not going to repeat it all, but I'm going to say all those in favor of moving into closed session, please vote. All carried. Thank you.
Request for a 5-minute break before we begin
5 minutes to get to the table with